here. Lovely. All right, we are going to convene this meeting. We're going to call this meeting to order now at 7:07 on April 21st. And this is a public meeting of the City of Portland's Police Accountability Commission. If the Spanish language interpreters, Ruth and Talia, can please give the information on Spanish language interpretation, that would be most helpful.
Yes, of course. Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenas tardes, bienvenidos. ¿Qué tal? Buenas noches. Estamos aquí precisamente en esta junta para hacer responsable a la policía en nuestra comisión. Si usted quiere escuchar esta conversación y en español, tenemos debajo de su pantalla un globo terráqueo donde ustedes se pueden conectar, dar el clic para que pueda seleccionar el idioma de español. Si quieren escuchar todo esto, si usted está conectado en un teléfono celular, por favor conecte en los 3 puntos donde dice más o more y ahí le va a salir debajo de su pantallita el idioma español. Gracias.
Thank you so very much. Really appreciate that. So now we'll enable the Spanish interpreters to move them over to the audio channel on Zoom. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Andrea and Amanda. You can pin their video feed if that is helpful to you. Finally, the closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. But please note that this is an automatic captioning service and it is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov. To ask for assistance, access assistance, including interpretation in other languages. Excuse me. This meeting is a public meeting and subject to Portland, City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon state law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. As the commissioners are presenting and or discussing things, if attendees have questions, feel free to submit them through the Q&A function. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversations during the meeting and future meetings and agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered both, the question and the answer will be visible to you and will become part of the public record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of your screen. Now, I would like to give my personal land acknowledgement, and this will be a personal, and we will evolve this into a commission's land acknowledgement. At this point, it's my personal land acknowledgement of the Clackamas and the Multnomah and the Chinook, the Clatskanie, and the Kalapuya nations, as well as the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. Each of these tribal nations have existed, and as you can see on this map, the Multnomah and the Clackamas are not represented because they have been absorbed into the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. In the acknowledgement of the genocide that created this country, I want to acknowledge the stewards, the elders and the stewards of the land, both past, present, and future. And that is my personal acknowledgement. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So I would like to pass this over to support staff to discuss the timeline.
Thank you. So the commission began meeting in December 2021, concluded its organizational phase of work at the end of March. As part of that organizational phase, the commission adopted an agenda and scope document that organized the rest of its work, and that document defined the next phase, which begins today, as the fact-finding phase. This phase is expected to go until early July and includes hearing from key stakeholders, identifying barriers to accountability in Portland presently, and examining systems of accountability from other jurisdictions. It also includes increased community engagement work to hear from the most vital stakeholder, the public. Future phases of work will develop the parameters for the new police accountability system before the commission presents that to the City Council in 2023 for their consideration and approval. Today is a work session on community engagement. It'll plan out and discuss shared expectations of members and how community member input is used and communicated back to members of the public. Next Tuesday is the full commission meeting for April, including a review of the work plan for the fact-finding phase, selection of co-chairs for this phase, and beginning to hear from the City Council, starting with next week, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty. On May 2nd, some of the outstanding internal process conversations will be wrapped up with a full commission work session on internal processes. And then the work of the full commission and subcommittees, the work on barriers, expert suggestions, research into other jurisdictions, accountability systems, and more will continue from early May to early July. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that overview. It's so helpful. So as we do with every meeting, we come to our community agreements, and I'm going to read them and just reflect deeply on these as we move forward. We're creating this safer container to have these conversations. And so that's why these community agreements are so critical. Keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region at the forefront of the work. Keep focus on the objectives of the meetings and individual agenda items. Utilize facilitators to note additional topics for discussion. Arrive on time and prepared to the best of your ability. Let the group know if you're unable to attend a meeting. Keep multitasking to a minimum. Contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate that best meets your needs. Treat each other with respect and be supportive of each other. Keep in mind that everyone has their own truth. Listen without agenda and refrain from interpretations. Be polite, courteous, and thoughtful. Assume good intentions from your colleagues and collaborators. Challenge ideas rather than individuals. Approach different opinions with curiosity and seek to understand. Use I statements and not we, you, or they statements. Affirm other speakers. Do not use violent words. Instead, say something positive about the previous speaker and simply add your own thoughts. Respect privacy. Everything shared in confidence needs to be kept in confidence, and honor the decisions of the group. May I have thumbs up for agreement with the agreements? Love this. Thank you. Thank you so very much. All right, we will move on. So today's agenda is, here's an overview of our agenda. So today's meeting includes a round-robin discussion on how members can reduce barriers to participation and how they plan community engagement events and activities. Following that, there will be an open discussion on who the PAC should partner with to run town halls, such as organizations whose members we want to hear from. Then there will be a discussion on listening sessions, including both general sessions to hear from the public, and if the PAC wants to have listening sessions focused on specific communities. After that, members will discuss and develop shared understandings around individual members' responsibility towards planning for, preparing for, and being present at these events. And the last discussion will be around developing a shared commitment around how to use this input in decision-making processes and make sure that their usage is clear to those giving the input. There will also be public comment toward the end of today's meeting. So I would love for us to go to the next slide. And this is, again, a round robin. So each person is going to be able to speak for 2 minutes. So we've upped the minutes from 1 to 2. And Victoria and I, as your facilitators, will help keep things moving along. And we ask that you speak once in this round robin discussion. Be willing to be facilitative and be constructive. Thank you. So next slide, please. We are going to try to answer both of these questions in your 2 minutes. How can members prepare and create community engagement events that have as few barriers to participation as possible? So you might want to jot that down. It is about reducing barriers or eliminating barriers to participation. And how should the PAC balance in-person and virtual events in collecting community input? So the second question is balancing in-person and virtual events in collecting community input. So I would love to have us go around. If you don't mind, let's stop sharing, and then we should be able to answer these questions, these 2 questions. Would anyone like to start us off? Yes, Angie.
So to prepare and create spaces that have as few barriers to participation as possible. I know I think that one of the things we do have to consider is that the people that if we're trying to pull in the entire community does not have access to internet. And so in referring to be in-person or virtual events, I think that we are going to have some in-person events for sure. But, you know, that's just my opinion. That's my 2 cents on that. And I would like to go out and talk to the public about this, to tell you the truth. So I think that, you know, I think going out and speaking with people directly is going to get a much better response than us having, not that these meetings aren't very effective, but I think speaking to people when they can actually look you in the eye in 3D is going to be much more effective, and they'll feel much more comfortable giving their input. And I will pass the baton.
Thank you, Angie. Dan has in the chat a point of clarification ? Dan, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, well, we had been polled by staff about whether we were ready to have in-person meetings, and I don't know what the result of that poll was. Is there some guidance about if and when that's being planned to happen? That'll help me understand that part of this question.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer to that question.
Yeah, so I can quickly answer that with 2 parts. One is it's a pretty mixed set of responses, as I'm sure every group can probably have some variation. I'm sure everyone can expect. I will say that question was focused on the for the public meetings, which everyone's expected to be at. Whereas this conversation is more about community engagement events, and later on in today's agenda, there'll be a discussion of, is everyone expected to be at those, or is it just a smaller subset? So it's slightly different. It leaned a little bit more towards willing to do sometimes than not ever, but there was plenty of people who said they'd be willing to do it without preference to be virtual, with that preference to be virtual. But again, that's for the full commission meetings and subcommittee meetings where everyone's expected to be there, as opposed to this question for community engagement events. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Dan. Do you have comment, or would you, shall I go on with other people and then can come back to you, Dan?
Yeah, I'm going to think about that now. Thank you.
Very good. Debbie, please.
So one thing I've thought about as I've been thinking about this community engagement thing is that I think one thing when I go to meetings and I might want to comment on something, I kind of like to know what we're supposed to be commenting on, because it gives me a sense of comfort to know that I'm, my comments are relevant to what's going on at that particular meeting. And so I've thought about with the community engagement meetings for this group, I think at the beginning of each one, it would be a good idea to explain, what the purpose of this commission is and what our job is, and the kind of information we need from the public to do a good job. Because otherwise, there's just so much you can say about the police, and our job isn't to solve everything. So I think that would just help guide people in what they say, so that they feel good that they're making comments that are actually going to be relevant and helpful to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Debbie. Who's next?
This is May. I'll go next. I responded on the survey that while in-person meetings does bring that personal connection, I know there's a lot of organizations and people out there that have that are going to transition more into the virtual Zoom mode, just because it's more efficient for people to be able to access and to attend events. We're talking about people who might have like transportation issues, conflicting work schedules, all of that. And so the many different groups that I do work with are offering or trying to offer more of like a hybrid model, or a way where people can attend virtually and have a live session at the same time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm going to go Faith, Eric, and then Jason.
Yeah, good evening. I am looking at the methodologies of the framework that we adopted, and one of the things that we identified was a variety of methods. So I think doing a mix of virtual meetings and in-person meetings feels appropriate. Also, as it's springtime and we're navigating what's going on with COVID, like an outdoor meeting feels inclusive to me. I think thinking through like welcoming the disability community, as I think giving as much information, practical information of there's 3 disabled spots, there's parking a block away, there's X, Y, and Z, please, like this entrance is barrier free. For folks with sensory disabilities, acknowledging like potential sensory issues that may occur in the meeting. So I guess the largest thing I'd love to see is just as much information as possible, similar to what Debbie was saying, so that folks can feel really welcomed and thought of, particularly as in our framework, we've identified that we're really trying to hear from folks that we don't normally hear from. and going to places you don't normally go is scary, and we're all anxious. So however we can assuage some of that anxiety feels important to me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of how we have the meeting or where we have it, of course, we have to be as accommodating as possible and as open and direct about what the purpose is. I think to the direct question of whether we do, remote or in person, I think it's 7 times 7 ways, right? Different people are comfortable with different methods of communicating. So I don't think it's either or. I think it's got to be both. And I would suggest we shy away from the idea of trying to do true hybrid, like having an in-person session while videoing it and having people dial in. And I mean, that just gets to be a logistical nightmare, so you have multiple opportunities on in person and remote, so that people can communicate the way they're most comfortable and have a chance to participate, whether it's an issue with the internet or their transportation, or some people want to stand up in public and speak and perform, but that's fine. We want to hear from everyone. So I would just suggest that we don't look at one way or the other. We plan it for as many times and as often in many ways as we can, and then go out of our way to accommodate everybody so that they're comfortable in that.
Thank you so much, Eric. Jason, and then Catherine.
Well, Eric got most of my ideas ahead of me, so I second everything Eric said, especially the area of hybrid meetings. They are a technical nightmare. They're really difficult to do, and everybody ends up feeling kind of marginalized because of the back and forth and the technology. So I would emphasize that more rather than less meetings, and to meetings to really be alive need to have quite a few people there. So outreach is extremely important here, and reaching communities that really are affected by the decisions we're going to make are essential, and those are difficult communities to reach. So providing access at all levels is important. We don't need to go overboard, but we do need to be conscious that the people who are involved here might have reservations about meeting. Well, example, the PSEPs, the earlier version of the PSEP had many of their initial meetings at police police precincts. And for people who are concerned about the police, that was sort of a no-go. So that would be an example of something not to do. And probably also in general government buildings are probably, people are cautious about those now because of security and because of, well, for a variety of reasons, but that's enough for now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jason. Catherine.
Thank you. I guess what's on my mind tonight are a couple of things. I think the first is that it's a lot to ask people to speak out against the police. It takes courage to do that. And if we really want to hear from people who have had experiences that have left them frightened, then I think we might need to figure out ways to allow more safety, to get their feedback. So one of the thoughts I had was in this, consistent with this idea of let's figure out multiple methods, is developing a survey so that people could provide input in that kind of way. Just producing, responding to survey questions and putting down their thoughts and their experiences, so we could collect them in that way, in a way that maybe feels safer to some people. That was the first thought I had. The second was really thinking about the houseless community in this in the city, which is, I think, if you look at the statistics, is the most heavily policed community. The arrest rates are so much higher in that community than any other community. And I'm thinking that as a community we need to go to. And I think it's a lot to think that if we hold a meeting, they will attend. I think perhaps, but I think it may end up being the sort of thing that could be combined with the survey, where we're out, trying to actually get people to give us their thoughts, going really literally going out to the streets to try to get that kind of input from that particular community. I think it may be the hardest community to reach, and in some ways, I think one of the most important. Those are my thoughts for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Winta.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I think, just in general, I would like to see us avoid organizing meetings and instead finding partners to host meetings for us and with us. And at the beginning of that, asking this very question about what is needed to make those spaces safe and meaningful, including whether or not we have in-person versus virtual. And I think, in our conversation tonight, particularly when we think about partners, I'd like us to be careful about making assumptions about, level of interest or even ability to participate, and recognize that really the biggest barrier, I think, is trust. And so finding trusted partners who can help us reach more deeply into the community, I think will be important for us.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yes, Tirsa.
Hello. I really like the idea that both Catherine and Winta are voicing about surveying, and I'm thinking perhaps an initial survey, or one of the surveys could possibly be just asking for contact information, maybe phone number, email, where people who may be hesitant to share in an open space may want to talk more privately, to have that option. Also maybe via an email. I think there was something, I remember reading something about maybe having an option for people to submit a comment through email. So that, yeah, I really like that idea. And then I feel like, where I think that us members, we can utilize our knowledge about organizations that are working with the populations that we want to hear about. So also perhaps maybe that looks like partnering with organizations that are working with these vulnerable populations, or the populations mostly affected, like the houseless, or yeah, people that experience mental illness. Yeah, those are my thoughts for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Lavisa, I'm going to go to you, and I'm making sure that we're focusing on events, right? Virtual versus in person, loving the survey ideas, and also remembering that you're the people who are going to be doing the doing. It's not some amorphous organization, but you are the people who are going to be doing this outreach. So just reminding us of the context. Thank you, Lavisa.
Sure, thank you so much. I really love a lot of the ideas I've heard so far, and I did particularly want to call out what Winta had said, because I had sort of had the same thought, which is that I would love to see this question or these questions be answered by members of the communities that we're targeting, and to hear what their answers are and their ideas are. And I also echo Catherine's concern about the houseless community being probably one of the most important communities we could possibly be reaching or hearing from, and also that being a community that is going to have far less access to internet, to electricity, to transportation, to the ability to get to an event. The event may need to come to them. And yeah, also echoing what Jason said about number of events, just giving people multiple opportunities to get to an event, to log into an event, hopefully an event coming soon, an event coming soon to a part of the city near you, something along those lines, so that they don't feel like, oh, like that was my that was my one chance. I would really love for there to be many chances for relevant stakeholders to speak to us and to be heard from.
Thank you so much. Faith, am gonna hop over to Sophia, and then I'm gonna invite Connie also to speak, and then have you go. Oh, yeah, and then Dan. So Sophia, Connie, and then Dan.
First of all, I'd like to apologize. I don't know why my camera is not working, but it's not. So pardon the box with my name in it. I like to also point out Winta's comment about and having these reaching out to these organizations to have them organize the events for us. There's also another community that we probably haven't talked about, but I find from my experiences had a lot of issues with policing as the deaf and hard of hearing. They have a tendency to be over policed as well, just because of the fact that people think they can hear and they can't. So there's a lot of violence against them because they feel that they're not complying.
Right.
So that's another group that I haven't heard anyone mention, but I know is highly affected by policing. The other thing is, since we are going to be doing these events ourselves, there may be a way for us as a group to, I know there's going to be probably subcommittees, but as a group, if we could just think about the different ways and think outside of our box, right, of what's been traditional, what I'd like for us to, it's kind of a mental exercise I like to do for myself. You take the question and you think of what you might say or what you might want to see, and then erase that, like on an Etch-a-Sketch, and then listen to what other people are saying. And then at the end, go back and write that again on your Etch-a-Sketch, and to see how much that thought has changed when you open your mind up, and how many more ideas you can get when people start sharing ideas, good or bad, agree or disagree. It's just a thought process that really has been very helpful to me. And it helps me get rid of my, preconceived ideas and thoughts. You want to make sure you know what they are, and then you take them away.
Yep, Sophia, I'm going to have to interrupt you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries. Thank you.
You're welcome. Dan, and then Connie, and then Faith.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I like a lot of ideas that I'm hearing. I'm hoping that when we're talking about removing barriers and thinking about hybrid meetings, that those two things are connected. People have been talking about trying to get people to go from one place to another to come to a meeting, or somehow we get to a place where other people are. But one of the things about what we've learned in the last 2 years is that this technology has been able to make it so that people can get together at quite disparate places. So I really want to think about, especially with new staff that we might be getting, figuring out a way to make as many of these events hybrid as possible. And that's also for access for us, so that people who on this commission aren't necessarily ready or willing to go to in-person events yet can participate in the outreach events ourselves. So I guess that's my my answer to the two questions. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dan. Connie?
Yeah, I have a question, I think, really quick, is how do people find out about our meetings now? Is there a way that we advertise, so to say, like that, even this meeting, for instance, I don't know if anyone can answer that question, but I think looking at that process and, you know, might be an example of how we can be leading better and differently. But I would echo Winta's sort of suggestions and, you know, inviting some of these organizations, groups to join us in the process. I think, you know, removing any accessibility barriers like we do with, you know, interpretation, you know, the ASL interpretation, all of those things also help. But I think, you know, just kind of good old fashioned doing the work. I mean, you know, the internet is an incredible resource, and Portland does have so many organizations that have already come about in this time or have been doing the work, and finding those partners is our job, you know, and just calling them in and finding ways to create the access and bring people in. That might be one of the best ways, rather than, you know, expecting people to find us, so to say. And so, yeah, I would ask this group, like, does anyone know how do we, like, how are our meetings advertised?
I'll find out that question for you, and we're getting there. We're gonna talk about town halls, which are working with those CBOs, and listening sessions. So you are spot on. You and Winter are spot on. Faith, you're gonna round us out. So we're gonna move to the next question after your comment.
One thing that Tirsa was mentioning was like a contact form or through a survey. And I think that's a great idea, to have folks who may not be able to participate in any of the events that we are participating in, like reach out and say, or to be able to say, like, I feel comfortable talking to someone one-on-one. And then, you know, a various number of us making the commitment to follow up with folks. And then also, maybe this is dangerous to acknowledge, but I will help develop a survey. So I'm volunteering for survey writing.
Love that. Thank you so much. So if we can have our next slide, pretty please. Discussion, PAC member expectations. So again, we're going to be brief, but this is an open conversation. And again, I'm going to ask us that we hold each other to our 2 minutes or less. Members can speak any number of times, but as we ask you to keep your comments to 2 minutes or less, please allow me to facilitate to keep things moving and call on members and to create space for everyone to speak. Finally, please be forward-looking and talk about the shared understanding we'd like to build here about what each member needs to do to make this community engagement a success. So the question is, what is a realistic set of expectations of each individual member around the community engagement events? What kind of attendance do we need? What kind of planning and organizing do you need? What kind of preparation do you expect each person to be responsible for? So again, it is your individual responsibilities that we are trying to discuss here. So while you kind of cogitate on that, one question could be, if the PAC has several community events, should each member have to be at all of them or a portion of them, like 1 in every 3? Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about here around attendance, around planning and organization and preparation. What are the responsibilities each person needs around these things? So I am going to call on Dan.
Oh, thank you. I didn't introduce myself before. I'm Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of the commission. I always try to remember that there's people in the audience that don't necessarily know who we all are. I am thinking about the quorum requirements and the public meetings laws, and if we all show up to all the meetings, they all have to be properly noticed, and that we also have to make sure that people know that we're there. So even if we're not discussing business, because we're all in one place, it creates a kind of legal dilemma for us. But I feel like, in a way, it's very hard to share those experiences that we hear about in these kinds of meetings with everybody to the point where everybody understands what we heard. And for instance, like at Portland Cop Watch, we run an incident report line, and I'm usually the one that's retrieving the calls and talking to the clients. And then I have like 1 minute at our meetings to talk about everything that I heard over the past month. It's really hard to let everybody know what you heard from those different people who had different experiences with the police. So I'm not quite sure how to overcome that obstacle. But in terms of our personal responsibilities for planning these things, I liked what I heard before about, like, let's have other groups help us organize. And I'm thinking about some of the groups that I work with and asking them to, if they want to set something up. And that way we can kind of reach a broader audience, but have them do a lot of the outreach and publicity. And then just however many of us can show up and attend and hear from those groups that, and I think a lot of us have those kinds of connections. That's my thought.
Thank you so much, Dan. Jason.
Would the plan be that we would compensate these organizations for doing this work on behalf of the city?
Cannot speak on behalf of the city. I will let city staff answer that question.
Yes, there is money available for that. It's not a large sum of money, but there is money available for that. And so I think that was suggested by a couple members going all the way back to October, and would be explored once the list of particular organizations is developed later in this meeting, in the brainstorming question, which falls immediately after this. Additionally, just to clarify, the plan would be that unless the other groups had, unless there was a reason not to, these meetings and listening sessions, town halls, whatever, could also be recorded and circulated to members who are unable to attend. There may be a process for determining, if it's a physical meeting, how to not be on camera oneself for those who want to remain anonymous, but for the sake of the members who are unable to be there, that they'd be able to catch up that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jason, are you done with your question?
I have a follow-up. Are there groups that or organizations, and I think that's very helpful. Thank you, Samir. I think that taking care of the logistics and not a lot of money, but a little money makes a lot of friends. Are there groups or organizations that might ask us to collaborate, but we would take a pass on?
That's going to be part of our next conversation, Jason. So I'm going to ask you to put that on the burner. Let that simmer over there. We're going to get to that. Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. Just in keeping with Dan's encouragement to introduce ourselves, I'm Catherine McDowell, and I use she, her pronouns. So I was thinking that, I felt like the subcommittee process worked pretty well in our organizational stage. And I feel like we might want to have a subcommittee really, maybe this is already the plan, but it seems to me that it might work well to have a subcommittee really take the lead on organizing the stream of meetings, and then making that schedule available for members. All of them would sign up for a certain number and we would share the work in that way. I think about that because I'm assuming that, as I remember from our both our scope of work and our community engagement document, that the community engagement it goes on basically through the duration, that is concurrent with all of the stages of our work and needs to continue on. So we will be doing this, but we'll also be doing the fact-finding work of this stage. So I feel like we, to make sure that it can all get done, it feels like if we have a few people really leading the organization of the community engagement process, but then we all as a group are sharing the responsibility of making sure that there's whatever it is, 4 or 5 of us at each one of the events. It seems like that might be a sensible way to do what we've proposed, which is ambitious, and that is to have community engagement be a parallel process with everything else we're doing over the next 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophia.
Yes, I just wanted to get some clarifying comments from Catherine. So are you suggesting like having, I know that community engagement is an ongoing thing, and maybe having a group, like maybe a full PAC commission as a subcommittee with maybe a couple co-chairs that kind of leads that through each phase. I'm just trying to make sure I understand what you're suggesting. And then, as a group, as a commission, the full commission, part of this sort of subcommittee that is ongoing, kind of distribute things through the, or maybe I should say organize through some of the co-chairs, making sure that everyone is being utilized efficiently and nobody's getting overworked and all that kind of thing. So that was just a question. I'm sorry, rambling a little bit because I'm trying to understand.
So I don't have a particular and specific vision. I just have the idea of having a small group of people becoming kind of our point people for setting up, basically taking the ideas that we brainstormed tonight and putting them into action, which is, all right, let's start to get the list of community groups we could partner with. Let's figure out what it is at this stage we want, the script for, the questions we want to pose to folks, and really get just kind of a schedule, both sort of an organizational outline for the meetings and a schedule, at least an initial schedule of events that would reach key stakeholder groups. And then once that smaller group has done that organizational work, then all of us join in and sign up to participate in what I assume are going to be multiple meetings, so that we're sharing the load of attendance, whereas certain people are really point on the organizational work as other people are doing other work of the commission. I hope that responds to your question, Sophia.
Yes, thank you. I'll wait and make a comment later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to chime in here at the moment to say that the full commission meeting on next Tuesday will include discussion about the role of subcommittees during this phase directly. And we're trying to develop thoughts here that can inform the conversation rather than having the conversation now. So
my apologies.
No. That's okay. I mean, it's just you're prescient. It's like, oh yeah, we are moving in the right direction, which is fantastic. But we don't want to get in the weeds. We want to do this again. If we can put the slide back up, what are those individual responsibilities in terms of preparation, planning and organization, and attendance? So we're maybe gonna do a committee And we want to just be able to have a shared understanding. Yes, Faith. Thank you. We can put the slide back down.
I think to Catherine's point a little bit is some folks, we don't need 19 cooks in the kitchen planning and organizing and preparing writing surveys, but we need to distribute the work equitably. And so for some folks, their skills will be community organizing and reaching out to organizations. For some folks, their skills are in person. For some folks, they don't feel comfortable being in person. So I think for what makes the most sense to me is for the commission to identify like, hey, this is where I feel comfortable putting 60% of my energy, and then 40% of my energy can be assigned elsewhere. I don't think that it's going to be that like anyone gets out of attending or listening, but that we can acknowledge like some of us are really skilled in some things and not others, and we can count on our colleagues to pick up some of the slack on those things. But my expectation is that all of us would be participating in all three of these things, just to different amounts.
Thank you, Faith. That's a wonderful observation. I'm going to call on Winta and then Eric, and then I think we can possibly take a break.
Great. I'm wondering if before the next meeting, we can hear what the approach of the Charter Commission has been. And I know Samir has talked to staff, the staff for that body, but it feels like there are useful lessons we can get there, both in terms of relationship with external community organizations, and then how the participation of the commissioners themselves have been managed.
Winta, just to clarify, were you suggesting bringing them into a meeting, that the staff from there, or was there another method that you'd prefer?
You know, I think just even getting their answers, like maybe you connect with Julia and just get the answers to these questions and share back would be what I would suggest.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I think just real quick to answer the specific questions you had on there, I think that, I mean, to Dan's point, we obviously can't all be at everything. And as others said, people might not want to do everything, but I think it's critical that everyone have at least some role in one of these three things at some point in the process, right? I mean, I don't think anybody can say, I'm just not going to show up to anyone. I'll be planning and organizing. I mean, I think we've got to have a cadence where everybody participates in some way, shape, or form with each of these three areas so that they're fully invested in this work. And then for the attendance, maybe it's a deal where we say that people are at a quarter of them, and then have, the 25 sign up for each one, that they're the folks that have to be there. Others can show up if they want, but have folks that are dedicated and say you have to be at a quarter of them, so that people are hearing these messages, whether they're in person or they're, Zoom meetings, whatever. But I think it's critical that folks hear directly from the people making these arguments and not just get digests or summaries, and that we're fully engaged. So I think we need to hold each other accountable and definitely not try to get to everything, but whether it's a quarter or 20%, we need to set a target and try to stick to that.
I love that. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. So Sophia, you're going to be our last speaker, and then we're going to go to break.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I like the ideas of Faith and Eric. But I also want to say that it's good that we all participate in the actual attendance, whether it's virtual or in person, because we are the commission, we are the faces of the community. We all should be there, and I think it makes others comfortable when they see us. And maybe your presence, when I say yours, one of the commissioners' presence, may be just the thing that would help someone be more open. You don't know, but we we have, because we're part of the community, people want to see us. So that was my whole point about just saying, I think we really do need to be there as much as we can in physical attendance or virtual. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. All right, more discussion to come on this. Really deeply appreciate this. Thank you. So let's take a break and we will come back at 8:07. 8:07, please. 5 minutes goes really fast. So before we jump into the next question, I do want to call attention to the Q&A. Philip has a suggestion in the Q&A. Would it be possible for the various subcommittees to host their own community forums on their particular given topics? That way the subcommittees can cater the discussion to their own input needs and have focused discussions. I thought that was an important suggestion to bring in. And so thank you so much for that suggestion, Philip. I also want to say that the online public comment form will also let you direct your comment to the subcommittee or the full committee once we know what the subcommittees are for the phases that we're going to be in. And so lots of things, lots of abilities are coming online. And so just wanted to tie this up right now. I'd like to move into our next question. Our next question, our next discussion is about town halls. And a town hall is when we have a group or an organization that puts on an event for its members to give input into the PAC directly. So they are in partnership with the PAC. They are marketing to their home base, to their constituents, and they're inviting them to come into this. And so that's the difference between a town hall and a listening session. A listening session is something that the PAC runs. That town hall is an event that is run by an organization. So the question then is, and again, this is an open discussion and that you each have 2 minutes. Who should we engage to do town halls with? This is a brainstorming opportunity. Who are some of the groups or organizations you'd like to collaborate on a town hall with? Whose members do we want to hear from? So I would love for us to have this conversation right now. What organizations or groups do we want to collaborate on a town hall for the PAC with? We started naming some. So if we can stop sharing, that would be lovely. And May, you raised your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I raise my hand too soon?
No.
Oh, okay.
Perfect timing.
So I would say I would start with the grassroots organizations. They seem to be groups of people that relate better with the marginalized, underrepresented, underserved communities. Those are the people that you will typically find interacting with community members in different events and resources, providing resources, all of that. But I would say, you know, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but I'm really looking at reality here and kind of about how much trust there is in the community, just with systems in general, but particularly when it comes to policing. And I don't know, even if we attempt that, we are going to be able to convince those groups to come talk to us. Like, I think throughout my work, a lot of it is focused on going out to the communities, but also like earning the trust of them. And I'm not so sure that we have earned enough trust in the community for those groups to come to us. But I would start with the grassroots organizations as soon as possible so that we could start maybe like a relationship or something. And hopefully, you know, somewhere in the near future, we would be able to convince some to participate with us and engage with us.
Thank you, May. Any other thoughts? Debbie?
So how about organizations that provide services to houseless people? I was thinking about like Join. One time the Housing Bureau did a event at their space, and people, there must be a day center there or something. There was a great turnout, great roundtable conversations. And so that might be a good way to connect with people who are unhoused. And Street Roots also might be another organization that has a very close connection. And I'm not sure if Sisters of the Road I saw a thing, they were sort of on break or something. So, but they also seem like a gathering place where they might be willing to help facilitate a conversation. Town hall.
The town hall. Yeah. Thank you, Debbie. What was the first organization that you named?
The first one I talked about is Join. They do outreach on the, to homeless people, and they have a facility out at like 82nd and Halsey, with a meeting room and round tables and everything. I mean, it was really a great location when the Housing Bureau had a thing with them.
Beautiful. Thank you, Debbie. Connie?
I'm not entirely sure if we have covered this, but is there any precedent set for organizations that we either work with or for already? Have we discussed like what that might look like? Because I'm an event producer and I plan events for a lot of different organizations. So I just didn't know if like calling out people that had been on my client list or something before was seen as a conflict of interest or anything.
That's a good question. I don't see it being a conflict of interest if there are hosting the event and doing the marketing for the event. But that may be a legal question that we should ask. Totally open to that. So thank you, Connie. And today's purpose is to create that list, right? Who should we be partnering with in those town hall meetings? If staff have any guidance, welcome.
There are no precedents of any variety on town halls or listening sessions yet, because this is a new commission. I can't speak to the legal question, but I think, yeah.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, well, I think I agree that the only conflict would come in if somebody's going to be benefiting personally from it. I think that we were all selected to be part of this commission because we have connections in the community. I think reaching out to those connections is important. What I'm struggling with is that as a grassroots organizer, and now I'm a public official when I sit on this commission, do I want to start naming the names of the people I work with and start telling the city all the people that we work with? I mean, some of that is public. I don't want to put anybody in a compromised position. So I almost feel like not adding names to this list without talking to some people first. However, there's one group that is already on another list, the list of stakeholders in the DOJ agreement that I think we should also work on a town hall with, that I'm also part of, which is the AMA Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. I think that they'd be able to provide space and get people together and have a lot of important input around people who've been harmed by the police.
I like that consideration, Dan, about reaching out first and then volunteering your friends. Clear that first. Yes, thank you. Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we also need to make sure we're not just picking the same groups that are always in these conversations, because you're going to get the same people and the same comments that we've heard before. We should think about things like, the Boys and Girls Clubs, right? I mean, they're in the communities and they work with parents and kids and youngsters and the communities writ large, not just a particular subset of the population of a community. And they can bring people together who might have a different perspective on it and probably less an agenda and more of, hey, here's what we're seeing in our neighborhood. I know they like to engage in ways like that, and those would be, they've got spaces, right? They've got buildings, and they're typically centrally located and on public transit and those kind of things. But I think community organizations that aren't necessarily about this issue only will give you folks that aren't necessarily coming in with their mind made up or with an agenda that we can just get generic information from and get their thoughts.
Youth have a lot to say. They really, really do. Connie, I'm going to piggyback on where you were starting to take us, right? You had some ideas, so I would love to kind of suss out those ideas if you don't mind. Oh, I'm sorry. I see you put something in the chat. May did, but I was talking to Connie. Yeah.
Can you repeat the specific, is there a specific question?
Sure. You were, I believe you were starting to talk about specific groups and potential partnerships.
Yeah. So May, listed Apano. I think that's a great organization. I've done some work with the OJRC. They currently are one of the main pro bono lawyer sort of firms that take up a lot of cases. They've largely been representing a lot of people that, were harmed by police during the protests this last few years. Work directly with Don't Shoot is also an incredible organization that I think would be great to work with. Not to at all put Winter on the spot, but I think Albina Vision Trust is doing incredible work. I have worked a little bit with an organization called the Maybell Center. It's a transitional housing organization that's based in Old Town. So people that have gone from houselessness stay there, and then they help them then get into their own homes. Yeah, I don't know. I could do a little bit more thinking, but that's just the few that come right off the top of my head.
Thank you so much. I want to read in May's suggestions that are in the chat. Apano, IRCO, Catholic Charities, and Lutheran Community Services. So, and then May also put in Oregon Worker Relief Group. Thank you so much. Angie, I believe you raised your hand.
Sorry, I can just type because I have a list of them. So I'll just type them into the chat if that's okay. Unless somebody wants me to read them all off, I can do that too. Thanks.
No problem. Any other thoughts around this? Dan?
Well, Amici to the DOJ agreement created a list of groups that they thought the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing might reach out to. And it seems like looking at that list would be helpful for us too.
Beautiful. We can bring that back as a resource. Yes, thank you. Tirsa? You're going to be, and then Jason, Tirsa, and then Jason, and you two will be the last on this.
Yes, this is Tirsa Sheher. I'm sorry I can't be on camera right now, but I have also, I was doing a list of organizations that I would personally feel comfortable reaching out to. One of them is Immigration Counseling Services. I used to work there, and then also both Workers' Rights and Education Project. I did some volunteer work there a couple years back. Also Care Oregon, SOAR Immigration Services, and then also ERCO, which was already mentioned by, I believe, May.
Mhm.
I would feel comfortable reaching out to those organizations.
Beautiful. Thank you so very much.
Well, I can help you with Care Oregon. So
Yay. I think, Jason, you're going to wrap this up. Is that right? Maybe not. Okay.
Say again.
Are you wrapping us up for this conversation? Did you have your hand up?
I'll send a list later. We don't need to workshop this.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. Love all of these resources that are coming into the chat. Thank you so very much. So, listening sessions. When the PAC puts on an event for the members of the public and broad communities or specific community groups or demographics are to give us input. And so listening sessions can be that going on the road and hearing specific groups. And so that is the next conversation part. What are the groups that you would like to be speaking with? Who should the listening sessions be held for? What specific community should the PAC create a listening session for? And how can we reach these groups and which members can assist? And how many general listening sessions should we plan for the fact-finding phase? Those are our questions. Again, this is looking for input. And so feel free to jump in, raise your hand, and I'll be glad to call on you. Thoughts around this? Yes, Eric.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I think we're talking about specific groups and just sort of throwing things out there, but we had a subcommittee on community engagement that we were very deliberative about listing certain groups we wanted to touch on. So I suggest we start with that, right? Instead of starting from, I mean, we did all that work to do the plan. So maybe we do that instead of doing something that seems like a one-off from that. We identified particular groups we wanted to target, and then we could identify, who represents those groups and how do you get to them. But that might be more efficient than just throwing groups out at random.
And this can be, a higher level conversation about not necessarily the group, but the audience, right? Who do we have to hear in order to make in order to make those recommendations to the city council? Who is crucial that we speak with, that we hear from?
Yeah, and that's what I mean. That's what we've already done, and it's in the chat now.
Oh, okay, very good. Very good. So from community engagement framework, we will prioritize engagement in the communities that have been traditionally excluded from City Hall and city decision-making, including Black, Indigenous, people of color, people with disabilities, immigrants, and refugees, the LGBTQIA+ community, people with mental illness, people with substance use disorders, houseless communities, youth, people who are undocumented, sex workers, activists, and people engaging in protest and others. I would like your thoughts on this list. loving the list. Lovisa saying yes to the list. Winter?
Yes to the list. But I have
Yes to the
another,
list.
yeah, I have another comment and question. So, the list and our approach rightfully emphasizes communities most impacted by police misconduct. I'm wondering if this is the appropriate time to think about the coalition of supporters we will need to get the recommendations ultimately adopted by the council, and if there are other categories of engagement that we should consider. And I don't have an answer, but want to put forward the question.
Excellent question. Faith.
Yeah, I think that was a little bit of my question to Director Myers earlier this evening. There is some strategy to community engagement and coalition building. So we're listening, and also, we're developing relationships towards the end of influencing city council. So I think acknowledging that this is the list of folks we want to listen to, and who do we need to connect with in terms of strategy of coalition building feels like an equal importance part of this community engagement work.
Beautiful. Debbie.
I don't know if it's possible to make this happen, but I think it'd be very interesting to talk to people who actually had the experience of using the current oversight system. And those are people who filed complaints and had their complaints investigated, and some of them may have gone through the appeals process of the Citizen Review Committee. So I think, hearing about their experience would be helpful. The other thing, and this may not fit into this particular category, but I also think it'd be interesting to have a nice conversation with people who have served on the CRC, or who have the Citizen Review Committee, or who are former Citizen Review Committee members, just for them to reflect on their experience, being on the oversight board that we have now.
Thank you for that suggestion. Okay. Very good. Thank you so much. So let's go to our next question. Town hall and listening session scheduling.
So this isn't designed to be a definitive list of dates and times, but to give some expectation of the windows and scheduling opportunities that exist for both the public and for members. Members have taken scheduling surveys several times, and there are many dates which don't work for enough members to have a public meeting in order to make a quorum, but which nonetheless have 7, 8, 9, 10 members consistently available, which could be a great opportunity as one of many options for timings for town halls and listening sessions. So just to kind of give a general idea, Monday and Thursday evenings tend to be great opportunities for full commission meetings, along with the occasional Saturday afternoon as well. But for weeks where there are not public meetings of the commission, those are obviously times where we know that the majority of members are available. Again, perhaps not enough to try and schedule a meeting if we know 7, 8 members aren't free and we're just barely making quorum. But for a town hall or listening session, it might make more sense. In addition to that, Tuesday evenings, as well as the sort of broad lunch hour or lunch 2-hour periods during weekdays tend to have a lot of members available to do it. And so the goal here is not to, again, not to say this is when they'll be, but to say these are some idea of potential times for when the PAC members that are working on planning a particular meeting, listening session or otherwise schedule it. Additionally, obviously, if working with another group, the people on the PAC side, the members who are working with a particular organization would obviously work with them on scheduling as well and their preferences and availabilities. So this is just a quick update on that.
Thank you so very much. So Jason, I see that you had your hand up.
Question, how many of these are we planning on presenting? How many community meetings, town halls, listening sessions, 3 different formats? How many are we going to do? Does that help us really understand, I think, to hear from?
That is up to you as a commission.
Maybe if members have thoughts on that, this would be a good time to express those as well. No, we can circle back around too.
Yep.
And perhaps put that in the parking lot if, oh, I see people.
Well, yeah, just thinking about this sort of roughly, right? Like each of these phases is 90 days. So, you know, it's like we have we're at the end of April, so May, June, most of July. So I think maybe we can think about it kind of just over the course of the arc of those, the next 3 months, essentially. And yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that will look like. If it looks like having 1 meeting a week, 2 meetings a week, maybe there are some maybe there are some weeks where there's 3 meetings and not everybody makes it to everyone. And I think something that we kind of touched on is the possibility of using a subcommittee, because then we would have to, then we could go by subcommittee quorum rules as opposed to full PAC rules for some of these meetings.
To clarify, and Dan, perhaps you can jump in on this because it was your point that was raised. Quorum is actually not necessary for a listening session or a town hall, because there's no deliberation towards a decision. It's rather to listen, and perhaps we can get a final legal opinion on that down the line as well from the folks who specialize in that part of law. But that's the understanding that staff's been given from city attorney's office previously. And I know Dan had raised a point on that too, but yeah, just to clarify.
Thank you.
Sophia, then Debbie.
Okay, thank you. It seems to me, you know, based on what Samir and Lavisa have mentioned so far, that, you know, if we're doing, well, maybe I should say this, if we're going to be doing community engagement throughout the whole 100 and, or whatever, a year and a half, 18 months, right? So we're going to be doing that anyway. And I'm just thinking we can look at, you know, time periods, right? You know, you have the summer months where we'll be able to be more outdoors, have different types of events. And, you know, as winter comes, the types of events would change. And also, it's also going to be determined how many we have based on, you know, how many people how many groups want to do town halls. You know, once we start getting that kind of information about who's willing to host that, then we can get a better idea of who wants to do it, when they want to do it, and whatever their venues are. So I think in our phase where we're starting to look at, you know, reaching out for town halls, then we'll have a better idea of how many we might have. Reaching out to the different groups, and we might be able to figure out how many town halls we might have. And then they may have ideas of their own about which times of the year they might want to have those. So that's just my comment.
Sophia, thank you. Debbie, you're going to wrap us up on this.
Yeah, I just was going to mention the listening session. So the league had participated in a listening session with the Charter Commission, and they sent out pairs to talk to targeted groups of, like organizations and people, small setting. They lasted a half an hour. They had a list of questions, sort of like speed dating for them. I mean, they did a half an hour, then they had another half an hour. I mean, they really were efficient with their time, and they were only dedicating a couple of people to each half-hour session. So, when Samir checks with the staff about how they structured that, it's kind of a good way to get a lot of different perspectives in a pretty quick and efficient manner. And I mean, that's just one set. Obviously, town halls will be big. Hopefully we'll have a lot of people there and, be more free ranging, but, and more time. But yeah, so I just wanted to make that point because I think it was interesting the way they did it.
Thank you so much, Debbie. May I have our next slide, pretty please? So community input, use, and feedback. We have like 6 or 7 minutes to talk about this issue. And so the next slide, please. The question is, slide after that, how will the PAC ensure that input collected at the town halls and the listening sessions is being used by members in decision making? How will the PAC communicate this usage back to those giving the input? Really critical closing the loop questions. Faith, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I know we've been dancing around subcommittee work, but what comes to mind is like a rubric of, hey, here are all of the thematic questions we're asking. We may not need to ask them in the exact same way, but here are the questions that fall under each theme. And the commission members who are at attendance in those events would then fill it out. Maybe it's something like a Google Sheet or, I don't know, a shared document. And then some form of subcommittee could go through and identify themes in each subsection. And I think we would want to be explicit of like, hey, here's the process. This is what we're going to be doing with your information. Here's when we will have the synthesis up on the website for you to see. Here's how it will be used, like even an infographic or timeline of like what's happening to your feedback and where it is in the little journey of feedback, I think would be really helpful.
I like the infographic idea. Anyone else? Dan.
Yeah, well, I think, we set this up in one of our founding documents about making sure people know that we're not just taking their stuff and walking away with it and then not doing anything with it, but there's going to be stuff that we can't do stuff with. And I think it's going to be very hard. I mean, I think it's really important to communicate. I think that's the number one word that comes to my mind about this is communicate. And for instance, the police ask for input onto their directives, their policies, and Portland Cop Watch often is the only entity in the entire city that comments on them. And then they'll post the finished one and they'll say, well, we got some comments, but they weren't actionable, which is very, dismissive of our very, I think brilliant comments, But I don't know how, when we're going to be listening to this many people, we can get back to all of them about all their ideas. But I feel that we just even within our commission, we need to find ways to do that, to give feedback to ideas that we've been putting out, like as we're contributing to agendas and things like that. It'd be really helpful to get feedback on why our ideas are or aren't incorporated. So I want us to think about that internally as well as how we're going to communicate that way externally.
And I'm gonna get to call an audible, and I get to ask Victoria and put her on the spot with her expertise of deep community engagement, and ask you to bring your voice into this conversation around this topic in particular, if you don't mind.
Of course, I mean, there's all the ideas that you guys have shared are very good. And I think the first, as you have mentioned, is identify who is your target audience, who you want to focus on. And then the second is how you're going to reach them. But also one thing that hasn't been mentioned, it has been mentioned, but not in deep, is how you will create, how the commission and the commissioners are gonna create these spaces that are safer. They don't exist. Safe space are not exist. Courageous space or accountable space for communities of color or communities that haven't been able to participate. What things are you gonna do in order for, if this organization is hosting this town hall or you are hosting this town hall, how the invitation is, every single aspect that these communities feel okay to be there and participate. What are the processes? What are the policies you're going to establish and the dynamics? That way, when somebody goes to this event or come to these meetings on Zoom, immediately they know that you're going to take them seriously, that they are the most essential part of your process. And without them, this process will not have any, it will not be successful or effective. And making sure that there is a common language of inclusivity and welcoming and respect, and also being very cultural responsive. As you know, each community has different ways to engage and different ways to they already have some people that they trust, and bringing maybe co-creating these resources with them, co-creating these meetings with them, not just with organization, but there's identify trusted messengers that are part, as you were saying, who we need to meet or partner with, that you co-create these opportunities to them. But focus on the people you want to reach is the most important, and making sure these individuals feel welcome, included, and valued.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for that wisdom. So appreciate that. Lavisa, you're going to be our last person on this topic.
Okay, well, I have really more questions than answers on this topic, I would say. My question was going to be, do we incur any quorum requirements, or do we incur public meeting laws if we are asking questions or sort of interviewing people at these town halls or at these sessions? You know, I understand that we'll have events, hopefully we'll have events that are so large and where so many people want to speak that we'll have to do sort of a public comment. You know, the person has 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, they say their piece, and then, you know, and then we move on. But it certainly would be helpful, particularly if we're trying to give people some type of feedback or some type of, you know, information about how their input, you know, could be used or is affecting us or whatever, you know, to be able to ask them a few questions and say, you know, so, you know, the upshot of what you're saying is, you know, like, or just be able to probe and ask a few questions. But I start to wonder if, you know, if multiple people are doing that, or if commissioners start talking about something someone is saying, do we start to kick into other sets of rules?
I think we might need to do some research on that, Lavisa. So I think that's a really critical question. And I think as staff do their research with the other charter commission, we'll be able to come back with that answer. So I think that's very helpful. Great line of questioning, great event today. Wonderful work you all have done this evening. We're going to transition into public comment. Is our next steps. What's the
Angie was going to give an update.
Can I say something really quickly? Is that okay? I'm sorry, Christine.
Oh, no problem.
I just wanted to let the commission know that we'll be emailing out and asking members to volunteer to help plan these different events that we've been talking about. And then those members can work with the staff to schedule the events and get people to attend. We'll also ask the members to report back to the full commission after their events are scheduled and some follow-up on that.
Beautiful, Angie. Thank you so much. Sorry to rush you through. Apologize for that. So we're going to go ahead and do public comment. We'll be taking public comment at this time. Before we take verbal public comment, I want to note that verbal public comment is one of many ways to get in touch with the commission. More information will be on the commission's website, portland.gov/police-accountability under the Get Involved link. We ask that members of the public to keep their comments to 2 minutes in length and to keep their comments focused on community engagement this evening. You can raise your hand in Zoom when you like and be called on. Okay. Thank you so much for this nice pause in our process to really ensure that we are giving space for public comment, because we do really want the input from the community. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to entertain these two hands, and then we're going to go to the parking lot recap, and then we're going to close our meeting. So I will be glad to entertain Dan and Catherine, and then we're going to move to close the meeting. Dan?
So I can let Commissioner McDowell go first if she'd prefer.
Beautiful, thank you.
Okay, I just had 2 follow-up questions, and maybe they're for parking lot. Maybe we can wrap them up tonight. The first one was the charge requires us to get input from stakeholders in the DOJ process. So I'm a little confused about, is that considered a part of our community engagement process, or are we doing that separately? We did not talk about that. There was a little bit of overlap, but that I think is a work stream that we need to certainly tend to, because it's in our charge. And I think it's also part of the coalition building that we discussed tonight. So that was my first comment. And then my second was really following up on the comment that Angie made at the end about asking people to start organizing these events. I guess I just want to be sure that we have kind of a central organizing framework so that there's consistency in how we're doing that. I assume that work will be done, that people will be organizing, that we will have some kind of rubric or framework so that everybody can use that, and then working to do the organizational work. I'm just afraid if we don't, it'll be messy. Thank you.
Beautiful observations and questions. Thank you so much. Dan?
Yeah, well, since we have a few extra minutes, I was going to try to bring this up at the beginning of the next meeting, but it's probably better to say it now, not take up time at the next meeting, that we are now in phase 2, as established by the fact that the end of our last meeting in March marked the end of phase 1. Our original plan said that we were going to try to have discussion about co-chairs at least for each stage. I'm not saying we have to change out, because we agreed that people can keep being co-chairs if they want to. But we did also agree when we adopted our bylaws, that we'd have a third co-chair. And I saw that there was some a request for volunteers that came up in an email, but it seems to me that we're already like deep into planning for phase 2, and it would be really good for us to put the question about co-chairs at the beginning of the next agenda instead of the end, which is where it is now. That's my my comment.
Thank you so much. Sophia and then staff.
Just to add a little comment for Dan, we are going to get to the, we're not in the next phase yet, and we're not actually deep into the next phase. We're just talking about some of the things that some ideas, so that when we get to the next phase, we could be a little more organized. And as far as the co-chairs, all of these things are going to be discussed at one of our next meetings. I think the agenda, I don't know if the agenda is out yet, but I thought that we're getting ready to get this agenda out if it's not out already. I know it's planned in the meeting. So a lot of the things you mentioned will be discussed there. Like you said, there was an email about, co-chairs and all. So thanks for thinking about that, but I understand, and I'll just let, I think Samir had his hand up. I'll let him just finish it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia.
Yeah, that's essentially it. I think the only thing I'd mention is on March 31st, entering that meeting and establishing the agenda for it, there were no bylaws, so it was impossible to ask folks to run for something that was not yet defined or to be a candidate for that at the March 31st meeting. And that was the most immediately preceding meeting to this one. So this one being focused on community engagement, the co-chair is determined to put it on next meeting's agenda. Thank you for clarifying, to read into the record Dan's comment. My specific request was to put it at the start of the meeting instead of the end. And thank you. Just wanted to clarify why it wasn't on the March 31st agenda. I think going forward, members of the commission probably would expect that co-chair selection for the next phase would be done before the conclusion of all current, all remaining phases.
Thank you for that clarifying information. And Dan, thank you for your specifics. Victoria, I'm going to invite you in to talk about our parking lot recap for this evening.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, commissioners. The notes I have for the parking lot for today's meeting. The first one is Connie, I don't have to say who commissioners say, I'm sorry. There was a question about learning more or thinking about how meetings are advertised in order to promote the following or the meetings on the community engagement phase. There also the more discussion or deeper discussion on subcommittees, especially in community engagement. The other is that taking in consideration the focus on the identify target audiences that are outlined in community engagement objective number 3 is the commissioners are asking, who do we need to connect with or who we need to consider to partner in order to build the coalition that needs to be built. And then the next one is the amount of town halls that the commissioners think that should be necessary or they should have. The other is what is the process or no, I'm sorry. It should be a process. An example was an infographic where the PAC can have and explain very clearly to the participants of these town halls or the public that offers feedback on telling them how their feedback is going to be analyzed or how the commission is going to work with the feedback these participants or the public is going, what they're going to do with them, how this is going to work, how it's going to be implemented, how it's going to make change. And then what other is, oh, that was answered. And also talk about the framework that needs to be developed or made in order to have a foundation for everybody to start reaching or organizing town halls. And if it's something that I miss, please, Christine or staff, Samir, that you can add.
I would say how do the stakeholders in the DOJ process overlap with the commissioners' communities that have already been identified? Did that make sense, Catherine? I was trying to sum up your, okay, thank you. Beautiful. That's our parking lot recap. Thank you so much, Victoria, for bringing in your wisdom and all of your help today. Thank you also to the interpreters supporting access to the meeting of the Police Accountability Commission and its subcommittees for all Portlanders. Thank you to the members of the public for being here and contributing your questions and thoughts. You can give written public comment in advance of future meetings at https://tinyurl.com/Portland PAC comment. And please sign up for email updates on the Police Accountability Commission at tinyurl.com/Portland PAC updates. Deeply, deeply appreciate everyone's time, expertise, passion, and compassion this evening. What a great meeting. Deeply appreciate each of you. Thank you.
Thank you.